What's going on, world? It's your boy Gemini Brown here, back with another episode of Nalo Kicking Knowledge. Today, we'll be continuing our Pluto through Houses series, and we'll be discussing Pluto in the 5th. So, let's get into it. What's Pluto? Pluto is the soul. It is the psyche of the soul, the desires that emanate from the soul, as well as the situations in which the soul is placed to trigger its evolution. And the 5th house. The 5th house is the house of children, creativity, individuality as a whole, and it gives a large portion of insight into our social life and what we do with our leisure time. Okay? So, Pluto in the 5th house, very interesting archetype. And I would say this, to gain better understanding of this placement, you should go ahead and look at the people who were born within the Pluto and Leo generation. I can definitely say for myself, while I was becoming adept at astrology, once I came across that particular generation, I had a large number of insights just in terms of how things work out, particularly Pluto. So when you get Pluto in the 5th house, and before I even start finishing my thought, we have the likes of Donald Trump, we have the likes of Oprah, Prince is at the 29th degree, Regulus, and who else? We have Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, very, very innovative people, and they do a great job. They've done a great job of really showing the polarity with Pluto. Okay, so when a soul is born with Pluto in the 5th house, they are coming into this life really with a strong desire to be great, to achieve their own personal greatness and actually garner the attention that they feel they deserve. So much like Pluto in the 1st house, which is also a fire house, Pluto in the 5th house feels like there's something special about me. You know, these are the people growing up and just know I'm different. Okay, I have something to achieve, a mark to make upon this world. And the karma connected here is interesting because it goes in many different ways, and you would need to really evaluate the whole chart to get a clearer idea. But for the most part, the soul has memories of greatness from previous lifetimes. So now this greatness can have been achieved in many different ways, or a life of luxury. Okay, so it can be where they were somewhat like royalty, you know, came from a prominent family, and in previous lives they lived a privileged life where somewhere in the psyche of the soul, you know, the ego was formed to know that I'm different from others. So that is still very strong within the soul. But here in this lifetime, the soul needs to develop a capacity, an actual reason to be honored, an actual talent. Okay, so it's gonna vary. You're gonna have some who naturally know what their talent is, and then others who find it later in life. But the real key thing I want to tell you here is that with all Pluto placements, the opposite house always plays a factor. And with all those people from Pluto and Leo who I've mentioned, we can see that. So the opposite to the 5th house is the 11th house, which is the group, our higher ideals, what we want to give back to society. Okay, so take a look at all those people and understand that in order to find your greatness, especially if you're a late bloomer in this aspect, you would need to embrace the group. You would need to follow a group or an organization in which you really identify with, you know, those particular ideals. So it's going to be a combination of the signs upon this axis. So if you're a 5th house Scorpio, you want to look into the 11th house of who really who falls in line with the things that you value. Okay, that can be, depending on how your chart is set up, that can be, material wealth in terms of finances. That can be, say, it can be music, it can be athletic ability, confidence, whatever, right? But you want to look at the thing that you particularly value. Okay, if you're a fifth house Libra, you're going to be attracted towards groups who are very headstrong and progressive, that foster individuality, things of that nature. Okay, if you're Pluto and Virgo, it'll be more likely with spirituality, creative arts, things to do with imagination and all of that. So definitely look towards the 11th house. But in terms of people with Pluto in the 5th, it can be seen as somewhat of a overly intense position, Pluto here, because this position is so strongly connected to the ego, and the ego can lead us towards making really bad decisions. All right, but one thing I will say about this position is you have an obsessive personality. That's the first thing you should acknowledge and understand, because that obsessive personality is what's going to lead you towards greatness. Okay, so and mind you, I didn't say addictive. So obsessive is more like when I like something, I really like it. I want to explore it from all different angles. Whereas addictive is more like I want this experience over and over again. They can border, okay, but understand that difference. So, person with fifth house Pluto has an obsessive personality, and that obsessive tendency needs a direction to be channeled in. So what happens here is that more than likely, if other factors are well in place or the Pluto is aspected well, you'll have individuals who are placed into positions in which their talent is able to be fostered and developed very, very early. So think about like children who play classical instruments, classically playing in the piano, the cello, things of that nature, child actors, things like that, right? Or even like with music, in terms of performing or whatever, the environment, your parents or whatever, it really helps you identify who you are early on, and you obsess over that thing, and you can really develop that skill. And through that, like I said, other factors permit, you'll more than likely find success. But the clear thing here is that you gain a sense of self early on in life, and your path is pretty much set in terms of developing that ego, that creative ego, that individuality. Now, in other cases, the person can be creatively blocked or repressed. Okay, there can be a sibling who you feel like you're always fighting for attention with, or let's say say you have like a Leo moon and it squares this a Pluto and Scorpio. Your mother or your parent, you can be fighting for attention with them. In some cases, the parent is jealous of the child. These things do play out, So, in turn, or the parent is very much so concerned with developing their own individuality that they don't look, to do it for the child. So, you have those two scenarios. And now what happens with the latter scenario where that doesn't get developed is that these people can really, because there's a need to be creative or be recognized, once they hit around, puberty and, start dating and things like that, high school, things can get pretty, that energy is looking for a channel, so it can get pretty messy in terms of, or clouded. When they start dating, that obsessive energy can turn towards looking for a partner who validates what they need to feel inside, and having giving all your attention towards your romantic endeavors, and then you're young and you fall into a pattern of constantly getting your heart broken. Or, you may start using drugs or just develop really bad habits because you're looking for a thrill that you're unable to get from creativity or understanding your sense of self. Okay? So you have those two scenarios. And then eventually, that person, normally after their Saturn return, they really start to find themselves and make better decisions. So a lot of times with Pluto in the 5th, a lot of times, their 20s, it can be filled with regret, or, they can just say, hey, by the time they're like 28 or so, they're like, I did so much in my early 20s, like, I need to do something else, and they become really conservative, okay? So, like I said, you have that tendency where it can fall into this obsession of relationships or just chasing thrills and not cultivating the energy in a proper direction, which can lead to, like I said, possibly addictions. But it stems from the fact that the person is actually, obsessive with things, right? So then going to the next scenario of that kid who, finds their niche early. As they get older, they may reach success, but then once they reach that success, they are unfulfilled, or a realization sets in that they have missed out on many experiences that other children have. It's always a sacrifice with, these things. And then in turn, as they get older, they may develop the latter of what I said, for the first individual. Okay? So overall, with this position, you really want to acknowledge your obsessive energy, find positive ways of channeling this. Okay? You want to also seek to find your talent. There is something individual about you, something that can stand out. More times than not, the person would do great with acting. So film, theater, something like that. If Venus is well placed, like in a second house or, a 10th house, it can be music or, many different things. But you want to find and develop that creative talent, as it'll give you the sense of ego that you're searching for. The pitfalls, like I said, to keep in mind with this is every relationship is not the one. You can date. You will be able to date. But lowering your expectations would be good for you. Really enjoying the funness of dating rather than going in with a serious approach. Okay? And then in terms of sexuality, there's another thing that can manifest here, and that's more so like where you could get like escorts or adult film stars, or just an overall sex addict. Okay, someone, if you chase, sex is not a sport. Okay, and the older you get, you'll realize like the sacredness behind it. So I can tell you this, you're like in the middle of your journey and you've experienced some of this. Seek out more committed relationships. The 5th naturally squares the 8th. Embrace intimacy, right? And when you do so, or just embrace intimacy, embrace long-term relationships. Don't be that person who gives it up on the first or second date, because what's going to happen is you're going to be constantly unfulfilled, and it's just going to lead you in more of a direction of unfulfillment. Whereas developing real love and intimacy through relationships leads to more satisfying and connected sex. More pleasurable and satisfying. Also, like I said, seek to be around people or look for groups that foster your own individuality. Okay, start as a team player, and being a team player, if you're meant to be a leader, you'll be given the reins to lead. Okay. Now I want to touch on something, but I don't want anyone to take it too seriously. Okay, if you don't have children yet, don't let this keep you away from doing so. But this is the house of children, and with that said, planets here are going to color the personalities of our children a bit and can give insight into experiences. Let's say this Pluto is squaring Mars or is squaring Saturn, something like that. For some, okay, and there's other factors you got to look into, it shows a difficult relationship with your child. And in some cases, just the child being very Plutonian-like in the sense where trouble finds them, or just very tough situations find them, such as, your child being molested, raped, getting involved with, the wrong crowd, ending up in jail, and in very worst case scenarios, murdered. Okay? It just shows there's a difficult relationship that can manifest in a power struggle between you and your child. You trying to get them to do the right thing, but them just not listening and eventually suffering the consequences of that. So if you have this position and you haven't had children, I'm not telling you not to, and I'm not telling you this is guaranteed to happen. It's just something to be mindful of. Okay? So, and it really makes it to understand where if you're in this position, you want to really give thought into how you would want your child to be, and pray, for protection for your child. And we have power here as individuals. So having a heads up on this can give you the awareness of going into the situation and knowing, what you need to be mindful of.